Okay, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to continue our reading on Schoenman. Would you like to say anything about our past reading, Dad?
Well, no, but about this one, I think we're reading the consequences of this collaboration, and uh, we talked about the uh, collaboration of the Zionists with the Nazis, and then, of course, with the other imperialist powers, which England and so forth helped them to set up their state in Palestine. And now I believe we're going to talk about the consequences. Of course, this was written long before. When was this written, Elsa? In 90 or early 90s?
88.
Okay. So it was written long before this current genocide in Palestine. But there were plenty of others, which Shulman will elaborate.
Yeah, actually, this chapter gets into the 1948, all the massacres. So be prepared. Viewer discretion
Okay.
is advised. Chapter 4: Tragic Consequences. In 1947, there were 630,000 Jews and 1,300,000 Palestinian Arabs. Thus, by the time of the United Nations partition of Palestine in 1947, the Jews were 31% of the population. The decision to partition Palestine, promoted by the leading imperialist powers and Stalin's Soviet Union, gave 54% of the fertile land of the to the Zionist movement. But before the State of Israel was established, the Irgun and Haganah seized three-quarters of the land and expelled virtually all of the inhabitants. In 1948, there were 475 Palestinian villages and towns. Of these, 385 were razed to the ground, reduced to rubble. 90 remained stripped of their land. So I didn't know the Soviet Union was complicit.
Well,
You know much of that history?
yes, I do. It's a question of pressure, you know. They had established Berozhin, can't pronounce it, a autonomous territory in the Soviet Union uh, because for Jews to have their own territory. It wasn't exclusive, but where it was predominantly Jewish immigrants. Of course, as Einstein said, the world will never forgive, will never forget the efforts of the Soviet Union to save hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Jews from Europe during the Second World War and move them to the east, away from harm's way. The world will never forget, but we might as well say forgive that effort. But when the state of Israel was coming into existence, you see, they world public opinion was in favor of the Jews who had been whose people had been persecuted. So they made concessions, but the Zionists were the labor Zionists at that time, and they actually had socialist pretensions. And we did discuss that in I think, in the Greenstein book, where these pretensions were completely false because they meant it only for Jewish labor. And of course, it was a reformist perspective. But anyway, Israel is 100% capitalist. But at that time, it was a bit ambiguous as to the character of the regime would come to turn out. And yes, the Stalinists did give support to originally in the 40s. But in the 50s and 60s and 70s, of course, they realized the true nature of the Zionist project. And they began to be the main supporters of the Arabs and Arab regimes in the area. So that's about all I will say about it.
Okay.
We might get back to it in more detail.
Okay. Removing the mask. In 1940, Joseph Weiss, the head of the Jewish Agency's colonization department, which was responsible for the actual organization of settlements in Palestine, wrote, "Between ourselves, it must be clear that there is no room for both peoples together in this country. We shall not achieve our goal if the Arabs are in this small country. There is no other way than to transfer the Arabs from here to neighboring countries, all of them. Not one village, not one tribe should be left." End quote. Joseph Weiss elaborated upon the practical meaning of rendering Palestine Jewish. Quote, "There are some who believe that the non-Jewish population, even in a high percentage, within our borders will be more effectively under our surveillance, and there are some who believe the contrary, i.e., that it is easier to carry out surveillance over the activities of a neighbor than over those of a tenant. I tend to support the latter view and have an additional argument: the need to sustain the character of the state which will henceforth be Jewish, with a non-Jewish minority limited to 15%. I had already reached this fundamental position as early as 1940, and it is entered into my diary." End quote. The Koenig report stated this policy even more bluntly: "We must use terror, assassination, intimidation, land confiscation, and the cutting off of all social services to rid the Galilee of its Arab population." End quote. Chairman Heilbrum of the Committee for the Re-election of General Shalom Lahat, the mayor of Tel Aviv, declaimed, quote, "We have to kill all the Palestinians unless they are resigned to live here as slaves." End quote. These are the words of Yuri Lubrani, Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion's special advisor on Arab affairs, in 1960. Quote, "We shall reduce the Arab population to a community of woodcutters and waiters." End quote. Raphael Eitan, chief of staff of the Israeli Armed Forces, stated, quote, "We declare openly that the Arabs have no right to settle on even 1 centimeter of Eretz Israel. Force is all they do or even will understand. We shall use the ultimate force until the Palestinians come crawling to us on all fours." End quote. Eitan elaborated before the Knesset's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, quote, "When we have settled the land, all the Arabs will be able to do will be to scurry around like drugged roaches in a bottle." End quote.
Jeez.
Ben Gurion
Pretty
is
graphic.
the final name. Yeah.
Go ahead.
The territorial ambitions of Zionism were clearly spelled out by David Ben-Gurion in a speech to a Zionist meeting on October 13, 1936. Quote, "We do not suggest that we announce now our final aim, which is far-reaching, even more so than the revisionists who oppose partition. I am unwilling to abandon the great vision, the final vision, which is an organic, spiritual, and ideological component of my Zionist aspirations." End quote. In the same year, Ben-Gurion wrote in a letter to his son, "A partial Jewish state is not the end, but only the beginning. I am certain that we can not be prevented from settling in the other parts of the country and the region." In 1937, he declaimed, "The boundaries of Zionist aspirations are the concern of the Jewish people, and no external factor will be able to limit them." In 1938, he was even more explicit. "The boundaries of Zionist aspirations," he told the World Council of Pole Zion in Tel Aviv, "include southern Lebanon, southern Syria, today's Jordan, all of Cisjordan, which is the West Bank, and the Sinai." Ben Gurion formulated Zionist strategy very clearly. After we become a strong force as a result of the creation of the state, we shall abolish partition and expand to the whole of Palestine. The state will only be a stage in the realization of Zionism, and its task is to prepare the ground for our expansion. The state will have to preserve order, not by preaching, but with machine guns. In May of 1948, he presented his strategy aims to the General Staff. Quote, "We should prepare to go over to the offensive. Our aim is to smash Lebanon, Transjordan, and Syria. The weak point is Lebanon, for the Muslim regime is artificial and easy for us to undermine. We shall establish a Christian state there, and then we will smash the Arab Legion, eliminate Transjordan, and Syria will fall to us. We then bomb and move on and take Port Said, Alexandria, and Sinai." End quote.
I'm
When
sorry, who were you quoting there?
Ben Gurion.
That's Ben Gurion. Okay.
When General Yigal Allon asked Ben Gurion what is to be done with the population of Lydda and Ramleh, some 50,000 inhabitants, Ben Gurion, according to his biographer, waved his hand and said, "Drive them out.
He was
Drive them out."
he was a half of a man, you know. I mean, his stature. And some psychologists like to comment on short people with
Yeah.
big, big ideas and big mouths,
Bonaparte or whatever.
tough guys, you know, to overcompensate
Yeah.
for their shortcomings. Well, anyway,
Makes sense. Yitzhak Rabin, the current defense minister, carried out this edict. In Lydda and Ramleh, no remnants of Palestinian dwellings remain. Today, this area is occupied entirely by the Jewish settler population. Mikhail Bar-Zohar, in his biography of David Ben-Gurion, describes Ben-Gurion's first visit to Nazarene. Ben-Gurion looked around in astonishment and said, "Why are there so many Arabs? Why didn't you drive them out?" The Palestinians were indeed driven out. Between November 29, 1947, when the United Nations partitioned Palestine, and May 15, 1948, when the state was formally proclaimed, the Zionist army and militia had seized 75% of Palestine, forcing 780,000 Palestinians out of the country. The butchery begins. Deir Yassin. The process was one of sustained slaughter as village after village was wiped out. The killing was intended to cause people to flee for their lives. The commander of the Haganah, Zvi Ankori, described what happened. "I saw cut off genitalia and women's crushed stomachs. It was direct murder." Menachem Begin gloated over the impact throughout Palestine of the Nazi-like operations he commanded at Deir Yassin. Lehi and IZL commandos stormed the village of Deir Yassin on April 9, 1948, slaughtering 254 men, women, and children. Quote, "A legend of terror spread amongst Arabs who were seized with panic at the mention of the Irgun soldiers. It was worth half a dozen battalions to the forces of Israel. Arabs throughout the country were seized with limitless panic and started to flee for their lives. This mass flight soon developed into a maddened, uncontrollable stampede. Of the 800,000 Arabs who lived in the present territory of the State of Israel, only some 165,000 are still there. The political and economic significance of this development can hardly be overestimated." End quote. The implementation of this program was carried out in part by Menachem Begin and in part by his future successor as Prime Minister, Yitzhak Shamir. As military commanders of the Irgun and Lohem Heretz Israel Lehi, i.e., fighters for the freedom of Israel, inhabitants were forced marched in blood-soaked clothing through the streets of Jerusalem to jeering onlookers before disappearing. Eyewitness accounts. The eyewitness accounts of these events foreshadowed the fate of the Palestinian people. Quote, "It was noon when the battle ended and the shooting stopped. Things had become quiet, but the village had not surrendered. The IZL, the Irgun, and Lehi Stern Gang, irregulars left the places in which they had been hiding and started carrying out cleanup operations in the houses. They fired with all the arms they had and threw explosives into the buildings. They also shot everyone they saw in the houses, including women and children. Indeed, the commanders made no attempt to check the disgraceful acts of slaughter. I myself and a number of inhabitants begged the commanders to give orders to their men to stop shooting, but our efforts were unsuccessful. In the meantime, some 25 men had been brought out of the houses. They were loaded into a freight truck and led in a victory parade, like a Roman triumph, through to Mane Yehuda and Sigon Yosef quarters of Jerusalem. At the end of the parade, they were taken to a stone quarry between Givat Shal and Deir Yassin and shot in cold blood. The fighters then put the women and children who were still alive on a truck and took them to the Mandelbaum Gate. End quote. The director of the International Red Cross in Palestine, Jacques de Reynier, attempted to intervene as word of the slaughter spread. His personal testimony is as follows. Quote, the commander of the Irgun detachment did not seem willing to receive me. At last he arrived, young, distinguished, and perfectly correct, but there was a peculiar glitter in his eye, cold and cruel. According to him, the Irgun had arrived 24 hours earlier and ordered the inhabitants by loudspeaker to evacuate all houses and surrender. The time given to obey the order was a quarter of an hour. Some of these miserable people had come forward and were taken prisoner to be released later in the direction of the Arab lines. The rest, not having obeyed the order, had met the fate they deserved. But there was no point in exaggerating things. There were only a few dead, and they would be buried as soon as the cleanup of the villages was over. If I found any bodies, I could take them, but there were certainly no wounded. This account made my blood run cold. I went back to the Jerusalem road and got an ambulance and a truck that I had alerted through. Okay, so wait, he was quoting what the commander had said, that there's hardly. So this is his
Yeah, I follow
testimony.
that.
Yeah, he was
His
saying
testimony,
the the
making light of
yeah,
the number of dead and so on.
yeah, that was the commander. So now this is back to what the UN or the Red Cross guy says. This account made my blood run cold. I went back to the Jerusalem road and got an ambulance and a truck that I had alerted through the Red Shield. I reached the village with my convoy and the firing stopped. The gang, Irgun, was wearing uniforms with helmets. All of them were young, some even adolescents, men and women, armed to the teeth, revolvers, machine guns, hand grenades, and also cutlasses in their hands, most of them still blood-stained. A beautiful young girl with criminal eyes showed me hers, still dripping with blood. She displayed it like a trophy. This was the cleanup team that was obviously performing its task very conscientiously. I tried to go into a house. A dozen soldiers surrounded me, their machine guns aimed at my body, and their officer forbade me to move. The dead, if any, would be brought to me, he said. I then fled into one of the most towering rages of my life, telling these criminals what I thought of their conduct, threatening them with everything I could think of, and then pushed them aside and went into the house. The first room was dark, everything was in disorder, but there was no one. In the second, amid disemboweled furniture and all sorts of debris, I found some bodies, cold. Here the cleanup had been done with machine guns, then hand grenades. It had been finished off with knives. Everyone could see that. The same thing in the next room, but as I was about to leave, I heard something like a sigh. I looked everywhere, turned over all the bodies, and eventually found a little foot still warm. It was a little girl of 10, mutilated by a hand grenade, but still alive. Everywhere it was the same horrible sight. There had been 400 people in this village. About 50 of them had escaped and were still alive. All the rest had deliberately massacred in cold blood, for as I observed for myself, this gang was admirably disciplined and only acted under orders. After another visit to Deir Yassin, I went back to my office, where I was visited by two gentlemen, well dressed in civilian clothes, who had been waiting for me for more than an hour. They were the commander of the Irgun detachment and his aide. They had prepared a paper which they wanted me to sign. It was a statement to the effect that I had been very courteously received by them and obtained all the facilities I had requested in the accomplishment of my mission, and thanking them for the help I had received. As I showed signs of hesitation and even started to argue with them, they said that if I valued my life, I had better sign immediately. The only course open to me was to convince them that I did not value my life in the least.
Well, that gentleman was certainly courageous. We'll have to look more into him
Yeah.
and what happened to him and so on.
Jacques, Jacques de Rainier, International Red
De,
Cross.
de. Well, we'll have to Google that. Okay, well, is that the end of that chapter? Or?
No.
Okay, continue then.
The slaughter at Duma. If Dar Yassin massacre was carried out by the rightist, revisionist Zionist underground organizations, IZL and Lehi, like massacres occurred on a similar scale throughout the country. The massacre at Duma in 1948 was perpetrated by the official labor Zionist Israeli army, the Israeli Defense Forces. The account of the massacre, as described by a soldier who participated in the horror, was published in Devar, the official Hebrew daily newspaper of the labor Zionist Institute General Federation of Workers. Quote, they killed between 80 to 100 Arab men, women, and children. To kill the children, they fractured their heads with sticks. There was not one home without corpses. The men and women of the villages were pushed into houses without food or water. Then the saboteurs came to dynamite them. The commander ordered a soldier to bring two women into a building he was about to blow up. Another soldier prided himself upon having raped an Arab woman before shooting her to death. Another Arab woman with her newborn baby was made to clean the place for a couple days, and then they shot her and the baby. Educated and well-mannered commanders who were considered good guys became base murderers, and this not in the storm of battle, but as a method of expulsion and extermination. The fewer the Arabs who remained, the better. The strategic value of Deir Yassin massacre would be propounded widely over the years by Zionist leaders such as Eldad, who, with Yitzhak Shamir and Nathan Yalid Moore, were in charge of Lehi. Speaking at a meeting in July 1967, his remarks were published in the well-known Journal of Opinion, Diot, in winter 1968. Quote, I have always said that if the deepest and profoundest hope symbolizing redemption in the rebuilding of the Jewish temple, then it is obvious that those mosques of Al-Haram, Al-Sharif, and Al-Aqsa will have, one way or another, to disappear one of these days. Had it not been for Deir Yassin, 500,000 Jews would be living in the state of Israel. The state of Israel would not have existed. We must not disregard this. With full awareness of the responsibility involved, all wars are cruel. There is no way out of that. This country will either be Eretz Israel with an absolute Jewish majority and a small Arab minority, or Eretz Ishmael. And Jewish immigration will begin again if we do not expel the Arabs one way or another. Murder in Gaza. The program of massacres did not end with the formation of the state. Mir Hartzar diary describes the massacres in the refugee camps and villages of Gaza during the early 1950s. Quote, the wide, dry riverbed glitters in the moonlight. We advance carefully along the mountain slope. Several houses can be seen. In the distance, we can see three lights and hear the sounds of Arab music coming out of the homes immersed in darkness. We split up into three groups of 4 men each. 2 groups make their way to the immense refugee camp, Al-Bur, to the south of our position. The other group marches toward the lonely house in the flat area north of Wadi Gaza. We march forward, trampling over green fields, wading through water canals as the moon bathes us in its scintillating light. Soon, however, the silence will be shattered by bullets, explosions, and the screams of those who are now sleeping peacefully. We advance quickly and enter one of the houses. Man hatha, Arabic for who's there. We leap towards the voices. Fearing and trembling, 2 Arabs are standing up against the wall of the building. They try to escape. I open fire. An ear-piercing scream fills the air. One man falls to the ground while his friend continues to run. Now we must act. We have no time to lose. We make our way from house to house as the Arabs scramble about in confusion. Machine guns rattle, their noise mixed with a terrible howling. We reach the main thoroughfare of the camp, the mob of fleeing Arabs growing larger. The other group attacks from the opposite direction. The thunder of our hand grenades echoes in the distance. We receive an order to retreat. The attack has come to an end. Kibaya and Commando Unit 101. Prime Minister Moshe Sharett, who was prime minister from 54 to 55, gave the following account of the massacre at the village of Kibaya in 1953. Ariel Sharon personally commanded the action in which men, women, and children were slaughtered in their homes. Quote, in the cabinet meeting, I condemned the Kibaya affair that exposed us in front of the whole world as a gang of bloodsuckers capable of massacres. I warn that this stain will stick to us and will not be washed away for years to come. It was decided that a communique on Kibaya will be published, and Ben Gurion was to write it. It is really a shameful deed. I inquired several times, and each time I was solemnly assured that people would not find out how it had been done. End quote. Charette noted in his diary details of further massacres in Palestinian villages in 1955. Public opinion, the army, and the police have concluded that Arab blood can be freely shed. It must make the state appear in the eyes of the world as a savage state. Kafar Qasim, the slaughter continues. The massacre at Kafar Qasim followed the Zionist pattern. In October 1956, Israeli Brigadier Shadmi, the commander of the battalion on the Israeli-Jordanian border, ordered a night curfew imposed on the minority Arab villages under his command. These villages were inside the Israeli borders, thus their inhabitants were Israeli citizens. Shadmi told the commander of the Frontier Guard unit, Major Malinki, that the curfew must be extremely strict and that it would not be enough to arrest those who broke it. They must be shot. He added, a dead man is better than the complications of detention. Quote, he informed the assembled officers that their task was to impose the curfew in the minority villages from 5 p.m. to 6 a.m. Anyone leaving his home or anyone breaking the curfew should be shot dead. He added that there was to be no arrests and that if a number of people were killed in the night, this would facilitate the imposition of the curfew during succeeding nights. Lieutenant Brankatha asked him, what do we do with the wounded? Malinki replied, take no notice of them. A section leader then asked, what about women and children? To which Malinki replied, no sentimentality. When asked what about people returning from their work, Malinki commanded, it will be just too bad for them, as the commander said. The perpetrators of Kafr Qasim massacre, a commando unit of Ariel Sharon, Commando Unit 101, were all rewarded with medals and with promotions in the Israeli Defense Forces. The genocidal methods needed to impose the colonial settler state within the pre-1967 borders of Israel are regarded as the model for dealing ultimately with the Palestinians in the post-1967 occupied territories. Aaron Yairi, former military intelligence chief and Minister of Information, stated at a public seminar in the Leonard David Institute for International Relations at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem that, quote, there are opinions which advocate that a war situation be utilized in order to exile 800,000 Arabs. These opinions are widespread. Statements have been voiced on the matter and also instruments, apparatuses have been prepared. End quote. That's the end of the chapter.
Well, you prepared us in your introductory comments about prepare yourself for, I forget how you said it, but the horrors of this chapter that we've just heard. And I think we have to at least force ourselves to listen to this and contemplate it. Not a pleasant job for us today, but it wasn't very pleasant for the Palestinians back then. So our great Jewish scholar, Schoenman, and the others that we've mentioned are doing their due diligence. And we need to do some due diligence today with the horrors that are being displayed for the whole world in Palestine today. So to remain silent is probably a stain on your soul.
Yeah.
So I guess do you have any
Well,
concluding remarks?
I was just going to say that obviously it's great that they're is a ceasefire in place. But I mean, what does that really do to this injustice that's been perpetrated? And obviously, you can see now the Israelis are going after the West Bank. They have been for a long time, but now they're really ramping it up because they're not bombing the hell out of Gaza. So now they've started blowing up buildings in the West Bank, imprisoning people. They shooting people dead. I think they just shot a 2-year-old girl the other day. Um, so what is a ceasefire? What does it really mean? I mean, there needs to be a solution to the whole thing, and that is one state, Palestine, with Arabs, Muslims, and Jews living alongside each other like any other state.
Yeah.
That's the only way to go forward. You can't have this settler colonialist state who's bent on the entire area. You know, they want Jordan, they want half of Syria, half Iraq. They openly state this. And so who's going to stop them?
Well, that's a good question.
They need to be stopped. And
Yep.
now, unfortunately, Syria, it has fallen. Say what you will about Assad. I don't really know too much about him. I know he was strangled with, what do you call them, sanctions. And so a lot of people were unhappy because they were having extremely difficult lives. And I guess they blamed it on Assad, people who didn't really know what was happening. But now we have HTS in there who are used to be Al Qaeda. You know, I mean, these guys now are slaughtering the Christians and the other minorities. I mean, they're Islamist extremists.
Yeah.
Also, they claim to be in support of Palestine, but I think that's just kind of a something that they're pretending, because they've closed off all the arms that were coming to help Hezbollah from Iran. You know, they've closed off all those channels.
Well,
So they're basically working.
that gives the lie to that pro. Yeah, well, they're politicians, and most
Yeah,
people
so
do
they're just
support
pretending to be
Palestine.
pro. Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
then they're allowing Israel to just take over more of land in Syria. I mean, they're just these puppets, I guess. Just
Well,
bought by the highest bidder, which is Israel and the United States. And I mean, that was why it was really exciting to hear Tulsi Gabbard in her confirmation hearing that she's outing the fact that the United States funds these terrorists
um,
as they carry out our bidding in Syria specifically.
yeah, she did. She pointed out the remark by uh, who's our national security advisor. Yeah, I, he's
Oh, Sullivan or
yeah. Thank you. She did point out that Sullivan had informed Hillary that ISIS is on our side.
mm-hmm.
So I mean that's
Syria.
from the horse's mouth, as if anybody had any doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, I don't
No.
know if you listened to that whole confirmation hearing, but she also brings up how, she's no fan of dictators such as Gaddafi or Assad. Um, but the fact that we fund terrorist groups in order to bring those guys down, and then it's just complete chaos afterwards, and we're just like, oh, whatever.
Well, it's a half a loaf,
Got our
I
men out of
mean,
there, and then now it's like actual terrorists are in charge of the countries now, and we don't really care because we just wanted to get the dictator out that was actually a strong leader and probably against Israel. Yeah, they're both anti-Israel, anti-American, more nationalist. want to get us out of there. So, and then we just bring in these terrorists who really don't care. They just want to get paid.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, the world, the ruling class is running this world because they have all the money, and that's what everybody needs or wants, and so that's the root of their control apparatus, and so they'll never fail to get uh, people to fight for a
Yeah,
nice fat paycheck.
right. So it will be interesting to see if she gets confirmed. I'm kind of thinking she won't because she was putting some facts out there, and she wasn't really. I mean, she kind of said Snowden. She just kept saying Snowden broke the law, but they kept saying, "Is he a traitor? Is he a traitor?" And
Yeah,
she kind of just tried to kept skirting that issue. Um, but because
yeah,
she said that whistleblowers are doing their duty. I mean, we shouldn't have all these nefarious things going on to require whistleblowing on.
yeah, yeah. Well, that was a good point. If you uh, wouldn't have to sweep up everything under the carpet if you weren't making a big fucking mess in the first
Yeah.
place. So yeah, but it's a very sensitive position that she's been nominated for, the intelligence czar, what do they call it?
Yeah.
And so yeah, they're going to bring out everything they can to probably knock her down and get some jackass like some general.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everyone was pretty much against her. The Democrats and the Republicans
Really?
during the hearing. Oh yeah, that was the toughest one. RFK was also pretty tough, but there were some senators on his side, the Republicans for sure. Maybe some Republicans didn't like some of his ideas, but no, everyone was against.
Really? I didn't watch the whole thing was three or
I know.
three
I've
and a
been
half hours.
I've been
I
watching
watched
all of them.
her opening statement and then where they were grilling her about Snowden
Yeah.
and a few parts like that. But she didn't get any positives from the committee.
I don't think
No
so.
support.
I'm trying to think, but no, I think everyone was grilling
You
her.
watched the whole thing.
Yeah. I've watched
Well,
I've watched all
if
of them.
they're indicating their criticism of her also, then she doesn't have any chance.
Yeah.
I mean, the two parties are split down the middle, so if
Right.
you get anyway,
Well, I just saw one. What's his name? Lindsey Graham. I
no,
saw him on a. They were asking him if he was going to vote to confirm her, and he said he at first he was very unsure, but the fact that she rolled over on 702, wireless surveillance,
oh,
and then I forget what other issue he said that she had said she was going to change her mind on or whatever. She was in line with him, so he said he was going to vote to confirm her. So
really? Wow.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, she's come out pretty strongly, as I understand, for the genocide in Gaza. That should help her chances.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they all had to do that. I feel like that was just.
Yeah. Well, politics in the United States, you have
I
to,
know. I
I
know.
suppose you have to do certain things.
Because she was kind of, yeah, she said things in the past about it. critical of Israel. But now it's like, nope. Now we got to be licking their boots.
Yeah,
Sad. It's really, really sad.
yeah. It's a grim situation in politics in the United States, period. I mean, it's as
Yeah.
phony as a
Did you
$3
see that
bill, no
that
goddamn
Tom
thing.
that Tom Cotton?
Yeah, he pulled out all the stops.
Wasn't that hilarious? It's just like, someone's calling you a Christian Zionist. I don't know what's wrong with that. I'm a Christian Zionist. I
Yeah,
believe that that's the land of Israel, and they need to. It's been their land for thousands of years. It's like,
yeah,
surprised
that's the line.
none of the other senators said anything. Like, nothing. It's just crickets, of course.
Yeah.
But well, and I've been watching. Of course, one of the best senators probably out there is um, Rand Paul.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Well,
He wasn't. I don't think he was at that part of the committee. They keep coming and going because all the committees they're going on at the same time. But he had some good stuff to say about Ukraine with Marco Rubio, trying to get
oh,
him
there's
to.
another one. What did he say?
Well, just the fact that he was talking about how we've already sanctioned Russia and that's not worked, and we have to kind of like come up with something else, or I forget, but Marco Rubio's just like, sanction everybody. Let's just keep sanctioning, sanction. And he was just saying it doesn't really help behavior. You
So
have to,
Rand Paul was insinuating that it's time for negotiations,
yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and lifting of sanctions is what he was saying because you have to have for good behavior. So basically, yeah, there's going to be some kind of like
Good
negotiating
behavior.
where we lift sanctions and there's some kind of well, and then
Well, we
he
got the master negotiator in the White House.
mentioning that Ukraine, will have to maintain neutrality, which is one of the main things Russia wants. They don't want them to become part of NATO and all that. So anyway,
Yeah. Even if they don't become part of NATO, though, they were armed to the teeth despite not being a member of NATO. So I don't know that it doesn't seem to me to be all that significant of a deal. But disarmed and denazified and pushed out of the eastern part of Ukraine, that seems to me the main things. And but yeah, from all reports, the Russians are steadily winning on the battlefield. So it's a terrible thing, but the United States has pumped more money in and keep the conflict going, the proxy war. I don't I Rand Paul. Well, I don't know enough about him, but all this hoopla about the lab leak, where he's supposedly holding Fauci's feet to the fire. Now, I'm afraid this is part of the psyop. You see, they have to keep
yeah, I don't
the
know what.
virus. If there's no virus after all this fucking shit, which
Yeah,
there isn't, then we have a world historical hoax.
yeah.
But if it
Okay,
was
wait. I'm
a
gonna
lab
cut you right
leak,
there. I'm gonna cut you right there because we're gonna be on YouTube.
oh, ha, we're not allowed. You see,
No,
so
don't
this
say
is
it.
where the self censorship
Don't
comes
say
in.
it. I know that's like the only thing that they'll completely take your video down. Isn't that strange?
Well,
Like you can talk about anything else you want.
we can't mention. Well, that's because of the significance of it. You
Yeah.
see, because the truth were known about the XXX that we're talking about, the entire world structure comes crashing down. The legitimacy goes to absolute zero, into negative territory, and there's no question if the people of the world realize how they've been flummoxed and abused and killed, then I wouldn't want to be in the shoes of some of these elites because it's pitchforks, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's why RFK is, you know, pretty significant. I mean, I know he's backpedaled on a lot of his ideas, but
Well,
I think we
he's
really
half
know
a
what he thinks. I think we know what he thinks about all that, and but he's just got to kind of backpedal on a lot of it to get in there. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. So
well.
excited for that one.
He brought out some of the autism in relate to the
Yeah,
MMR and I would say vaccine skepticism. He always says he's not against
yeah,
vaccine. But getting back to this Rand Paul's hearings, you see, if it's the way he says that there was a bug that jumped out of the lab, either intentionally or unintentionally, well, the then we have about 10 people that can be held responsible in Wuhan or in Fauci's group. We could say blame them, but the blame goes a lot further, as I indicated. So it's very important that people see through this lab leak bullshit, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah. They were kind of hitting him on the. I guess RFK at one point said that Lyme disease was lab created, and that's like that book that I read about the lab up in off of Rhode Island. Um,
Hmm.
I forget
I
what
remember that.
the name is,
You
but
told me
that's
about
where
it.
they were. That's where they were studying Lyme disease, and then some of the first cases of Lyme disease were like on the beach across from the lab, um, because they had a bunch of like they were studying all kinds of stuff like foot and mouth disease and all these with a bunch of livestock. They had tons of livestock on the island because that's what they were testing stuff on. But a couple times when hurricane would come through, the whole island would lose power, and it would just like at one point it lost power for like days. The people on there couldn't leave the island. It was like just total chaos. All the where the animals were being held were full of water, and the sewage was backing up, and then the rain was coming through. So basically all these viruses and everything just got out, obviously, because they didn't all their containment was without electricity. They couldn't contain it all, and the waste and everything. It was pretty crazy.
Well, they've got these biolabs all over the world, and yeah, you see, to use an insect as a vehicle spread infections, whether they're bacterial or whatever, fungal or whatever. This seems quite like I certainly wouldn't discount that as their capacity, but as far as airborne viruses, the whole contagion myth, this is what needs to come crashing down. Read, you know, Tom Cowan. He's got a book, The Contagion Myth, and he will prove it to you. And Kaufman or Mike Stone or any or Christine Massey or the Mark Bailey or his and his lovely wife uh, have proven it. Mark Bailey's taken down the entire virology, the science of virology.
Yeah.
So this is the only good thing of this uh, pandemic. Can I say that?
Probably not.
The only good thing, you always have to look at the good side. Uh, we've got now thousands of, at least many hundreds of scientists who are dismantling this whole idea of pandemics, contagion. Mike Yeadon, who I've sent out recently, uh, you know, David. I'm trying to think of David Martin. You know, I mean, I've sent these out on email. Maybe we could, since we're getting into that subject a little bit here, maybe we could post some links. You have to listen to a Mike Yeadon, okay? There's no possibility of a pandemic, nor has there ever been one, okay? This is the essential. This is where they gripped you by the lobes in the back of your skull. Okay, this is where they gripped you there, and they're working you good. You know, they've gotten so much mileage out of this, was going back to the Spanish flu and on back. You know, that was disproven completely. Check the Rosenauer experiments, 1918, 1919, Boston and San Francisco. They had hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, could not make one of them sick from a person who supposedly had the Spanish flu. These people didn't have any flu. They were poisoned by these experimental jabs that they received and by nerve agents and so on that were being used in the war and perhaps other factors. But there was no virus. There's no Spanish flu virus. Okay. So, and then these experiments, according to Cowan and others, have been repeated numerous times. I haven't checked all. I've read about the Rosenauer in the official National Institute of Health website. And the last words of Rosenauer, after spending over a year trying to make one person sick from a sick individual, was, well, we really don't understand it. We're as shocked and surprised as anybody, and we may have to, this may have implications to our own understanding of virology and so on. And they left it there. But these have been repeated with a common cold. Who wrote the book, Can You Catch a Cold, recently published? You can't. You can't do it. So we've got a house of cards here that's been built up over the years and been so convenient to the ruling class. These invisible enemies, okay? People were starting to shrug off the tourist deal, you know. I haven't seen any tourists in my town. Well, and no, and you probably won't, you know. So the fear level started to dissipate. But with the invisible microbes, these are heavily armed. Each one of them is heavily armed, and they can fuck you up. And so it's the perfect thing. It's fictitious. but it's very real in people's mind.
Well, I'm skeptical, but
Well,
let
I'll
me
send you some material. Read the material, okay? Don't
you
be just
let's
skeptical.
see what our maybe our
It's
viewers
conclusive.
can comment on this and let us know what they think.
Okay, we kind of got off of the subject, but that was a very very good reading from a very great historian who's now passed, Ralph Schoenman.
Yeah, yeah, we'll have to continue another time, and we'll try not to be. I guess it's been quite a while since our last one, but the next chapter is on the seizure of land. Um, so getting into that. So
Okay, yeah, we'll continue with this because it's topical. We'll say. Uh,
yeah, I mean, we're just gonna have to keep the pressure up. What
well,
else?
maybe we can come up with a few ideas for people who might say, "Well, what in the hell am I supposed to do?" And maybe we can put our heads together and figure out some kind of plan in our areas or the
Yeah.
go-to thing is always send a letter to your congressman. Well,
Hmm.
this is the answer to everything that it's gone bad, but it doesn't do anything. But
Well,
it makes you feel like you did.
even protesting doesn't do anything either.
Well, that's right. We need a general strike. We got to get into the unions. We got to get into the unions. And
There's a general supposedly, I don't know, I just saw it on TikTok, a general strike, mass protests for the immigration going on here.
what's that now?
Well, they're saying don't go to work, don't go to school, and then there's a lot of protests going on for the immigration.
For the immigration.
Or
What do you
you
mean?
know how they're mass deporting people right now in the U.S.
Yeah.
Like everyone's kind of scared. I've heard a lot. Some of our people have just left
Well,
voluntarily.
yeah, there's a big long caravan of people
Yeah.
fleeing
Yeah.
voluntarily.
Right. So this was just a day. There's some protests that I've seen in down in Texas and in LA. They took over the highway. Um. Anyway, so today was just like a national like strike day.
Uh, Dorothy's been reminding me. She's quite enthusiastic about Scheinbaum, Claudia Scheinbaum, and she has taken the right posture. She's promised these people returning jobs,
Yep.
homes, training, a stipend. And,
Nice.
this is if she can make it work economically, because, it's not a rich country and they do have debt already. So, paying for that, if can be done, is the right way to go, especially guaranteeing people employment.
Yeah.
If you can't guarantee employment for everybody, you don't have a society. Okay, you got something else. Know what to call it? Margaret Thatcher called it a marketplace. Okay, a marketplace. We got a marketplace, but you don't have a society.
Yeah.
So you meet the dictionary definition of a society. So yeah, if she can do that, would be quite significant.
I mean, that's kind of my thought on it. It's like Americans. I mean, they voted for Trump because yeah, they think immigrants are the problem. I guess. But so it's like we're just fucking ungrateful. So yeah, why not get out and then we'll be the ones hurting. We'll be the ones. Wait a second. Wait a second.
Well, yeah,
Oh,
certain.
our work here. Shit.
In certain industries like construction, agriculture, and perhaps others that will be immediately impacted. You know,
Yeah, I see these assholes on TikTok where they're like, I just called ICE on the Mexican restaurant, so they're going to be hiring now. It's like, you dumbass, they were already hiring. Now they're just going to fucking close. Idiot.
no.
I mean, this all these places are hiring. Restaurants, everyone's hiring. So I don't know what they're talking about.
Well, you've mentioned that there's jobs going begging there in your
There
area.
really is. I'm not joking.
Well, it could be in your area. I don't think that's nationwide. The official number is 4.1, I think, unemployment, but they only count, it's undercounted. It's more like 8%. They
Yeah.
don't count people who are not looking for jobs consistently and so
Well,
forth.
I
And
would
there's a lot of intermediary, like half jobs,
yeah.
Uh,
I would really like to talk to an unemployed person because I don't know any.
all of your Mexican friends are, well, they're mostly working at the restaurant, huh?
Yeah, or in the fields. Or some other ones work in manufacturing. Yeah, they have like good jobs at the car manufacturing plant and stuff. They might have their papers. I'm not really sure, but
So you
yeah,
don't
they
have
all have
any
jobs.
obvious unemployed like street sleeping in the streets
Well,
and
there's like three homeless people in town that I know. They sleep under the bridge, and but as I said, they're not all there. Like they need like help. They need to be like in a place that helps them because
I
not
see.
um,
Yeah,
they're just not all there. There's schizophrenia. I think one of them has schizophrenia or something. He says a lot of uh, crazy things, but so and then in all the people that are live right around here, they all have jobs. So I don't know.
yeah. Well, we'll better close this up, but
Yeah.
we'll get back to the U.S. Mexican uh, relations and issues, perhaps in a future one here.
Okay.
We'll see how it shapes up here.
Yeah.
It's
Please
very
like.
early in the Trump administration.
Yeah, a lot going on, a lot happening. I wish I knew how to play the stock market because I feel like this is a time where you could make some money. I don't know.
How's that?
I
Short or long?
uh short.
Short or long? Short means you think it's going down, and long means you think it's going up.
Yeah,
So
but on
I don't
specific,
know
well,
who
like with
you call that.
tariffs, well, with these tariffs being imposed, like if you knew how that was really going to play out, yeah, you could short or long some of the commodities. No,
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure
and I know
the
that like
experts are going.
cryptocurrency. I just read the cryptocurrency is like tanking.
Well,
I don't know
I
why,
don't even understand that shit.
me
So
neither. But if
we won't uh,
if we
be.
have any investors out there, please send us a private message with some investing opportunities.
They won't get any enlightenment from me on those issues.
No.
Okay, yes.
Okay, like and subscribe, please. Share with your friends and comment if you agree or disagree with us. Until next time,
Yeah. Feel free to comment.
feel free, please.
You know, people think, the old wise saying, it's better to keep your mouth shut and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubts. Well, we're not going to judge you. Just go ahead and express yourself.
Judgment free here.
Well, not completely, but we're tolerant.
Throw us any conspiracy
We're
theories.
open minded. We're learning. We're not experts.
All right. Goodbye.
Okay, I'll see you, talk to you soon.